I'm Austri Reifer, and you're listening to Good Vibes Sunday, a podcast brought to you by I Am Warhol, the blog. Every other Sunday, I'll be sitting down with provocative thinkers, industry disruptors, and culture changers. My intention for every guest is to talk about breaking barriers, shifting old paradigms, and really just opening up in vulnerable conversations. In between guests, I'll be having Candid Sundays, which are where I just come in and I have a candid day where I just talk about life and I do life with you guys. Good Vibes Sunday is a place to fuel up on good vibes every Sunday. I don't pretend to have the answers to all of life's questions, and I only hope that my personal experiences and those that I share of others will help you in some way to be able to relate those into your life and hopefully bring you that much closer to the answers that you do seek. So please join me on this journey of getting your dose of good vibes and filling our homes and our hearts with good vibes. Happy Sunday, everyone. This week's guest is Joel Contreras. Joel is a real estate agent turned developer and interior designer. He's mostly based out of Phoenix, Arizona, but has also worked in surrounding areas and as of recently has been venturing out of state. His work has appeared in several medias, among them Dwell Magazine, one of my favorites, Phoenix Home and Garden, and many more. Joel specializes in creating incredible spaces on a budget. I mean, this guy makes homes look like they are straight out of a magazine somewhere in Australia, and he really does it on a budget. Before you listen to this podcast, I really recommend that you head on over to our website where you will find all of his work. And if you don't know how to do that, if you are on iTunes right now, you will see below this podcast, you could see where it says going back to webpage. Click on that and then we'll meet you back here. At the root of all of his designs, you will notice modern architecture influenced by many places around the world, such as Australia, Scandinavian design, and so many more. However, his ethos is if something is historic and it's in pristine condition, he doesn't dishonor it. With proper scale and understanding of design, he really brings together two eras. Instead of trying to recreate false sense of history, he introduces today's architecture and amenities to the past, which makes for a wildly beautiful and a one-of-a-kind type of home. But all of this couldn't be done without a little controversy. And Joel knows about controversy. So we talk all about that today. We also touch on just so many different things that have inspired him over the years and just his journey and how he got his start. Adam and I were huge fans of Joel and his work. We have been for a while. So we're really excited today to be able to share a little bit about his mind and what inspires him and just everything between his family and situations that he's been through, circumstances, things that he has learned from, and just those secrets that I feel like as designers, as we're starting off, we'd love to know. And I feel like just anybody and everybody could really relate to Joel in this podcast. So we're really excited to share that with you today. So please help me in welcoming Joel Contreras. All right, Joel, so thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah, Joel, welcome.
This guy.
Thank you.
All right, Joel, so let's dive right in. So how did you get started on design? How did you get your start?
So I got started as a realtor this was about 2005, 2006 era. I'm old. I was a realtor. My clients, I chose a niche area that I basically said it's impossible to be an expert on everything. My niche, I wanted to be cool architectural properties, modern stuff, historic stuff, anything that was really good design. So I had a pretty good network of clients that were design-minded. The architects, the designers that would look for those kind of properties, and I would find them stuff that would make for good remodels.
Sure.
And I got rewarded for it. I got a commission if I found them something, and so I trained my eye, I honed my skills to think like an architect and think like a a good designer and find those properties. And I was very successful at that. But it just so happened that there's like twice that I found the perfect property, in my opinion. And all of my clients were like, nah, I'm not seeing it. Or, I don't know, man. I don't think this one is. And, I was just kind of taken back by that. Like, what? How could you not see it? This is amazing. So essentially it was my vanity or this cockiness in me or something that was like, how dare you second guess this place?
Yeah.
And so I ended up buying the property myself and doing a remodel on it. The cool thing is
very cool.
Afterwards, most of those designers would say they'd come in after like demo phase and they'd say, hey, can I get the next one? Is there another one listed? And I felt vindicated. Like, that's great, you see it now.
Right.
And I used to joke that I wanted to buy, if this were a financeable option, I would seriously buy stuff and peel off 3 layers and strip it back,
sure.
show its roots and sell it and make a small profit. But you just made the house unfinanceable. But anyways, it was that. And at that same point in time, one of the things that bothered me was that I would see a lot of flips by people in the neighborhood that would buy, say, for example, like a really cool, iconic mid-century modern home. Like in Phoenix, we have a couple of architects like Ralph Haver and Al Beadle that are kind of like Joseph Eichler to us here.
Yes.
Sure, absolutely.
And they'd buy these homes, and it always frustrated me because you would think that the home would go to the person that bought it would understand what to do with it. And that's not the way that flip world works. Like, the people with the most money have no idea what they're doing.
Oh gosh.
We talk about that all the time, Joel.
Yeah, that's
okay, so it was very frustrating seeing like a Ralph Haver home bought, and a couple people would do it right. It was always like there'd be the homeowner that bought it that did a ton of work themselves, this labor of love that lived there for 2 years. And I don't know what it is about that type of remodeler that's it's like this masochism or something where they love to improve, and the minute it's done and beautiful, they sell and move on and find the next project. And those are my people.
Right.
And the other people were the people that would just do a Home Depot remodel and pick the worst finishes and make that property worse than it was when they started. And they didn't know that. They literally thought that they would improve it. And I still see it quite a bit today is, people that are proud of their remodel that don't understand anything about either historic properties or mid-century modern design. They don't know. They think they did a good thing, and they're not. A lot of them aren't doing it to be a bad person. They just aren't educated.
I agree.
So at the time, I kind of thought in my head, this needs to change. There needs to be someone that would lead by example and do flips. And I hated even calling them flips. When I started getting published a lot, I thought it was clever. The local newspapers coined me as the anti-flipper. Oh. And I was like, thank you, because it was hard when people would be like, oh, so you're a flipper. And I'm like, well, flippers do this. I take a year on a project and spend 3 times as much money. Yeah, I guess that's true. I do need my money back so I can do another one. I have to sell it. so
I love that.
I thought that there needed to be someone that led by example and did things the right way. And so that's kind of how I got started as a designer, was just doing my own stuff. No one would hire me yet. No one knew who the heck I was. But then after as soon as I got good and was like, this is the world I need to be in, the market crashed. Yes. So then I just survived for 3.5 years. But I stayed studying design that whole 3 years, and I thought about what I would want to do. And when you go to places like Chicago, New York, and even LA, San Diego, there's a lot of different buildings that have been converted into lofts We didn't have that. So I said, but what we do have is a lot of modern homes.
Right.
I'm not the first guy to ever do something kind of modern to a historic home, but I think I was the first to see that the potential in that. And so I had to develop a rule system that essentially was, you can't buy a historic home that has all these unique architectural features, preserved features, this really pristine historic house that's stood the test of time, and then go ahead and just modernize the heck out of it. It's insensitive.
Right.
So what you have to do is you wait and find the thing that's been just hacked apart and, for lack of a better term, bastardized over time. It's been remodeled in the 80s or 90s in a bad way, and they ripped out the old kitchen and doesn't have a whole lot. And you still need to go in there and say, I need to figure out what the architectural features. What are the features that I need to preserve here and keep?
Right.
But if you kind of make that house into a loft, I predicted accurately that you'd be able to sell it quite easily, because in no other area of Phoenix really do we have like the old historic red brick in downtown Phoenix. People wanted to, and I wanted to be a part of downtown's resurgence. So when I started doing remodels, I would spend way too much, and I would say what I was going to sell it for, and people would say, you're crazy, you're out of your mind. I would do it. And then I'd move on to the next one, and I created a little bit of a following of people who would say, I want your next remodel. People will pay way more for something of quality.
For sure.
It's tough. It's a tough game, but there's a way to make it work.
All right. Thank you for that. That's extensively knowledgeable, just because I feel like I love where you say you have to keep that integrity of those historic homes, but to find the ones that have been basically dishonored, in those 80s and 90s, and just to convert those.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you ever, the ones that have been stripped, do you ever bring that historic quality back to them? And then then you also modernize the latter half of them?
So this, I'll expand on my whole code of ethics regarding this subject. Within historic preservation, there's a lot of rules. I read the national standards quite a few years back, and I recommend that to anyone in historic districts, is read through and then discuss them with peers and friends. My take on the national standards is that when you're not supposed to falsely recreate something. There are restorations, there's a line you don't cross. Say our old church, something blew up, and 15% of that church was now, the facade of that church was obliterated or something. And you can just have a craftsman come in there like a mason and rebuild that portion, or make it look like it used to. That's fine. What if 50% of that church was obliterated, or the facade of that church? There's a line where now it's fake.
Right.
It's like a fake historic church when you recreate it. What you'd want to do is to use modern materials and honor that by doing the same thing in a different material, showing the evolution of that property.
Ooh, I love that. The evolution. Ooh, I love that.
Okay, so this is an important argument, because when you look at things like in Europe, and you have some cities that are just pristine and everything's preserved, you have some cities that have evolved. You have Paris. Everyone cites modern day Paris as this city of perfection. It's not too high. Everything's kind of 6 stories throughout. But they had to tear down medieval Paris in order to build that.
Right.
So historic preservation is such an interesting subject. I consider myself a huge preservationist, but I'm very controversial, because I believe strongly in standard number 3, which states essentially all new construction needs to be clearly distinguishable as new and of the present era. You don't want to create a false sense of history. And that would be an analogy I don't know if you guys have been to Tombstone, Arizona, but Tombstone is thought of as like a Disneyland type stage set, when it's actually very historic. It's got historical reference to it. when the time came to build something new, they mimicked the old, and now you can't distinguish the new from the old. So it kind of like devalued everything. So that's something that where I believe that, and I travel a lot, and I've been to Europe quite a bit, and I love it when I see this whole street of things that are historic, like say 3-story brownstones, and then one of them needed to get demolished or something in the middle of this whole street. And what got erected in its place was some glass and steel thing. Right. I think it just helps all of it. It shows this isn't a museum, it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. I like that.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
So that's kind of the method that I take in and again, it's a little bit controversial, but when I'm in a historic district and I see a need for new construction, I don't want to do a fake bungaloid. I want to do something that's modern, that's either flat or gable, that's, you know, compatible to the neighborhood in terms of its massing and scale. But if you think of it like, what would a parking lot look like if you park a bunch of cars from 1927, 28, 1931, and then a different car pulled in the 80s, and a different car pulled in 1952 and 75. It would be a mixed parking lot of, you'd have a Gremlin, a Mustang, a Ford Bronco, and then it would look very different when you had a 2018 Jaguar sitting next to a 1927 Model T.
Right.
However, they're all cars, and all of them are supposed to be reflective of their own time and place.
Right.
So it would be like, don't park a rig next to it.
Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, I like that.
That's kind of the analogy.
No, I like that one. That's I don't know. I like that a lot.
Yeah, no, it puts it into really...
Yeah, no,
he said thank you. No, it puts it into perspective because you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all homes.
Yeah.
And
yes.
and I love how you said, I read one of your interviews that you did, and you said it's like the contrast, right? The juxtaposition. Between the new and the old, and you just said it right now. You'd never want to replicate something that isn't original. Like, you want to be able to enhance it, and you want to be able to honor it, but you never want to replicate something that isn't what it is.
You know what's funny though? How many times have we sold a property, and I've sold it, and I've sold a 1927 cottage, and then there's a lot next door, and it goes, it recently been sold, and they're like, well, what's going to be put there?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, I think a cottage is going to go next door, and they're like, okay, good. I was hoping nothing else would be put there.
Yeah.
And it's funny that...
No, but to take this in a little bit of a different direction, Joel, so you told Adam and I that the market crash, I mean, you just mentioned '07, and you said that it really shook you. You had told Adam and I this once, and then you went through a life-changing experience when your beautiful wife got cancer. How did that time of your life change the course of your business, and then how did you come back from that?
Okay, well, I used to, when I was a younger man, I would kind of like curse God when I didn't get my way, or curse the skies, or the Almighty for not getting what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I'd say, come on, God, why couldn't you give me this? Or I wanted this. And the older I get, the more I'm like, I just kick back and say, all right, this is something I'm supposed to get through.
Oh, I love that.
I don't know what the heck the meaning of this could be yet, but yeah. I'm open to figuring that out. So in about 3.5 years ago, my wife got diagnosed with breast cancer, and that was a very, at that time you'd hear about people getting breast cancer, but it didn't happen in our family. This is some strange. So when it happened to us, it was very scary. We had a 1-year-old child at the time. And I just was kind of like paralyzed with fear, not being able to control that. After you have cancer, you end up hearing from a lot of people that get diagnosed. And one thing I say, it sounds morbid, but I'll say to people, calm down, hold on, you're not going to die right now.
Right.
There's a good chance your life might be shortened, but it's not going to happen now.
Right.
I was staying up all night researching. I felt very insecure about my understanding and knowledge of cancer. And I was obsessed with, like, how do we beat this? How do we combat this? And it was a taxing moment because there's obviously the emotional side of it, and then there's the financial side of it. We lost my wife. My wife couldn't, she had cancer treatment to go to all day. She couldn't work. She didn't have a job that, she had to take time off to go through treatment. And there was, even though health insurance covered quite a bit, there was still quite a bit of bills to pay. I'd happily pay those, knowing that the bulk of those were covered, but it's still an amount that is, it's like saying, hey, you gotta
absolutely,
you gotta make twice as much money to cover your wife's income and to cover all these bills with one half of the time that you have, because I wanted to be a very active part of my wife's treatment. So absolutely. That was tough, but how it correlates into my work was that these projects, you want to be really passionate about them. You want your heart to be in them, and it's not something that you'd want to do at the time your wife was going through cancer treatment. You wouldn't want to start a project or be a developer. It's like, that's the last thing you want is stress of borrowing and having to deal with interest payments and that kind of stress. But it wasn't too much for me to design for other people. So I said originally that I was going to take like a year off when I had my son, because I wanted to kind of start things off in being a good dad and being attentive and being there for my child, and not kicking it down the road like I'll kick in and be a good dad when my son's 3 or something. So I told myself I'm going to take a year off. Well, I ended up taking more time than that off without developing. But I started designing for other people because we had to pay the bills.
Absolutely.
And initially, what was funny is people that used to call me and say, will you design for me? I love your style. I'd say no, because you'll ruin it. And I ended up getting a lot of those people would say, I'll do my best. And what I didn't want to happen was to have to basically like manage. This is what I think about design, is that here's the recipe, and I have to leave it to you to cook that. Okay. Cook that recipe. That's kind of the equivalent, is that you guys might be amazing at that, where you'd honor the recipe and be like, wow, Joel, come see our meal that you designed.
Right. That's a good
but the next person might be just terrible at it, and your name's on it, and it's tough.
Sure.
So I would have to do site visits and try and essentially you're teaching people, which goes into, cool, I'm giving everyone all my trade secrets and just pouring them and educating them.
Yeah.
But I thought about that, saying, if you really cared about your city, if you really have a love for Phoenix, this is what you're going to want to do.
Right. You're
going to want to be selfless about it. You're going to want to, teach and help. And so I basically kind of committed to saying yes to as much as I could take on. I was very busy. And my wife had like an extended amount of treatment, that this thing was something that we dealt with for 2 years, and it's not like the second year done with treatment.
Right. It's not a one and done.
Just goes presto. Yeah. It's a process. But the beautiful thing is kind of like, maybe I think that your life is a little bit like a rubber band sometimes. Mm-hmm. You're tested, but when it snaps back into place, you're like, nice. Got this now,
Yeah.
That's the cool thing now, is that I was forced to design for other people. I never really wanted to. I always thought everyone else is they can't develop it like I can. I'm a bit of a control freak in that regard. All my best projects are usually, to date, my best projects are the ones that I personally, did. I was the developer on them. I was my own client.
Right.
I can ensure that they're going to turn out really well. Right. And so there still is that, but that's the cool thing, is I can still do stuff. Like, I can do one every few years. I think I'm a really good realtor. I think I'm a pretty good designer. And I'm a good developer. And as markets change, it's good to be able to be able to kind of discern, like, this is what I'm going to do for now.
Absolutely.
Because there's always ways to make money in the world of real estate. If you stand in front, there's always money flowing back and forth. You got to figure out what direction it's going and stand in front of it with a net.
Absolutely.
With a wide net.
Yeah.
No, I hear you.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
After the crash of 2008, I didn't want to be a one-trick pony, a jack of one trade. I wanted to be the jack of many trades, I guess. So it's all a journey, and for right now, I'm pretty grateful for the spot I'm in. My wife is doing great, and one of the things that I don't know, I'm an idiot for this, but I committed to building us a house for her to honor her. Mm-hmm. I thought about during her treatment, I thought, how would that be if I had to look forward to chemo every day with this uncertainty, and I had to face this? So I thought, well, you might have met cancer, but cancer hasn't met me.
Right.
So I took her on a bunch of trips. She'd have a chemo every 3 weeks, and so I took her on a trip in between those time periods. Essentially, I'm like, what good is money sitting in the bank on a time like this? And then I decided to buy a house that already had a really awful addition, and I thought, this house could be so cool, and no one sees it. Yeah, that's a problem I have.
Yeah, that's not a problem. That's a good thing.
So I decided to remodel it, kind of to have a better house that honored my family.
Absolutely.
And that was a lot. I don't know, looking back, I wasn't sleeping a lot. I took on a little too much, but now it's cool because I have good balance back in my life, and
absolutely, and
that's I'm pretty grateful.
So important. That is, I'm so glad you bring that up, because I think that, and I love that you said that your money is better well spent during those times. Do you feel like cancer changed you? Because earlier you said that, before, when things wouldn't go your way or whatever it was, you'd blame God or whatever it was. But do you feel like after her cancer, it kind of opened you up? Like for me, for example, my mother figure passed away from cancer. And for us, it was like she was diagnosed and 3 weeks later she was gone, So, and it's funny because I remember Adam's old coach, his daughter had cancer, and he told me, he goes, Austria, this cancer diagnosis does not mean death. And I was like holding on to that, but then she was gone 3 weeks later. But for me, it was, I always say, the reset button. So it changed my entire life. I see everything so differently now. But for you, do you feel that way? Do you feel that today, because of her cancer, that now because you even said before, it was like, I'd hang on to that money in the bank and it was a different situation. Now you're like going on the trips. You're embracing life. You're savoring life a little bit more. Do you owe that to the cancer? Do you feel like maybe things do happen for a reason? So
my wife and I have a joke that we say that's we used to basically say we wish everyone could get cancer.
I love that. Yes.
Even if it's just as a joke, like, oh, we pranked you.
Yeah. You
don't really have cancer, and hopefully you learned something from this exercise.
No, I say her death was the best and the worst day of my life. People are like, how do you say that? I'm like, no, like, you don't understand. It changed me. It was the best and worst day, the hardest thing I've ever been through, but the best thing.
Yeah, so I would put it this way, is that I was probably living my life. My whole life was probably, the point of it was to enjoy the last 20.
Right.
It was, when you have kids, it really makes you like thank your parents. And you have to thank your parents up and down, like, oh my God, I have no idea what you went through.
Yeah.
I seriously think that if you have like kids that are like 20 and they have all their like fingers and toes and hands and legs, you got like a B already.
For sure.
So one of the things for me was I was like a party animal, wild child during my college years, and college years kind of bled into like I just went out, I partied, I had fun.
Yeah.
I always kind of felt like there was a certain amount of time that I could do that. And when I hit like 30, I said, you know what? I think I've given my family enough anxiety, and it's time to start honoring my family. When you're developing, you're like, I think I have money, but it's all out there. I don't even know. Like you're spending a lot weekly. You're in your personal life. You're trying to keep your expenses under, maybe $3,000 a month, and yet you're spending $30,000 a month on your project.
Yeah, it's all tied up. Mm-hmm.
It's tough. It's like this certain like risk factor that's tough, but it's a good, developing's fun. There's a lot of good upside, but I guess what I'm saying is when my wife got cancer, it made me start living for today of saying, what if she didn't live a prolonged life? What if her lifespan was shrunk? I'd want to make sure that everything we did counted, that all the time I had. So that's where I try to be now, is to say that work is something that we do, that it's easy to get sucked into. And I say this, and I'm a bit of a hypocrite at this moment in time because I took on a whole lot. But in my life, it feels like money is always the source of like, oh, if I had more money, we could do this.
Right.
And yet, in a different way, it's just like, doesn't define anything. Money is nothing. It's just, life is what matters, and how you treat people, and how you, your relationships, and the things you do, the activities, what you do on your off time. I don't remember working a 40-hour week. I wouldn't remember what that's like. But I do think the important thing is I make sure that I have enough time with my wife, with my son. We try to go my wife and I try to do a date night every Saturday without our son, to remember that we're still a couple.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of things that we do that I look at going, you can't, like, this is what I think. And when we travel to Europe, you get a lot of this. Is people that say, Americans, they work like dogs and brag about it.
Yeah.
And we do.
And we do. Absolutely, we do. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't, like, that was programmed to me a whole long time ago. And so I got way better at that, but I'm still bad. I'm like, instead of like being a 9 on the scale of 1 to 10 about being a workaholic, I'm like a 7 on the scale of 1 to 10 now.
but at least you've gotten to a higher level of it. You know what I mean? At least you're more aware of it now. And no, that's excellent that you brought that up. So she passed away, but right before she passed, she told me she was an immigrant from Mexico. And she came over, so she had nothing, but she was able to buy her own house. But she worked in LA every single day and drove 45 minutes to LA. And she told me, she says, if I regret anything in my life was that I worked so much and I didn't enjoy my life. So you're right. When we do go, and we all will, we don't think back to those 40-hour weeks that we pulled. We think about all the memories. We think about whose life did we change, and
you're not going to remember, like, you're not going to be smiling on your deathbed, with this memory of just crushing out work and, like thinking of the office time. You're going to remember all the fun things you did, and the travels and the events, and how the relationships that you had.
The relationships, yeah. And then for you, Joelle, but regardless, you have created, for me, like you say, it's not about the money, but it's also about the impact that you have. You can take, when you go one day, you can take that gratification of knowing I made a difference in my city. You know what I'm saying? Like, I created a movement. I created this impact, even if it is in a small way, in a small city, maybe not the entire world, but you have created a movement where I feel like, you said I'm not the first person to do it, but I did kind of create this movement where people began after me. And now today, a lot of people are doing it, and I think it did start with you. So that's something to be definitely proud of.
I consider myself a little bit of the OG of downtown design, because there's so many good designers coming up that are younger, but they're passionate, they're talented, and I tend to try to be friends with most of that group. I believe strongly in being a part of the change you wish to seek in this world.
For sure.
The way I feel in life is that every time you'd enter an industry, you'd be so excited about it. Design world is no different. Developing, no different.
Right. Developing's
hard because of something I touched on earlier, is what you think you did in the community. It doesn't matter. You could have 5 friends that said, "Oh my God, what you did is amazing." There would be a neighbor that hates it.
Right.
And there's someone on the street that hates what you're doing. No matter what, it's impossible to please everyone. It's why I love designing stuff in just regular areas instead of historic districts, because you don't have to worry about pleasing people. Those still have a neighborhood, though.
Yeah.
This is weird. I'll say this, okay? No one helps anyone in any industry. All anyone does is like tar and feathers each other, and there's all this like everything's too competitive. Everyone is cutthroat.
So true.
And no one ever wants to like give people advice and I wanted to be very different in that. So there's a group of people that are younger coming up doing really cool things in my neighborhoods, in the neighborhoods of Phoenix, and I always offer support to them and say, let me know if you need me. I think that that's very important. I wanted to be influential with the doers, and I like that aspect, and I agree with starting a cool trend and movement. That is something that matters huge to me. The balance thing is tricky, because every time I think I've got the perfect balance, I end up tweaking it in some other way, and now I'm off over here, and I've just started trying to get in better shape.
When you say balance, what do you mean by that? Is that by the advice that you give? Because that was my next question.
No. Meaning, like what we touched on earlier, lifestyle balance.
Got it. Okay, yeah.
This is what I feel like, is that there's a pie chart. And when I was like 26, 27, I worked. I had a lot of successful loan officer friends that were making really good money. And they tended to think that everything was money. Like, you know, it'd be like I'm this badass because I make all this money. And then I had a bunch of artist friends, and my artist friends were the worst. Actually, they were like, "Oh my god, that person has no artistic skill at all." It was like this snooty. And then I have an identical twin brother who's a strength trainer. And I'd go hang out with he and all his friends, and it would be like the measure of a man was based off of how much muscle he had. And then I'd go out partying at night, and my party friends would be like, it was like social status, or you could get in.
Right.
All those things matter a little bit, and then none of it matters. It's like what kind of person you are, but your lifestyle matters so huge. Like lifestyles contribute to success. And so for me, achieving that balance where I'm not overdoing it on one or two areas, but to put it more appropriately, to where I'm not staying up till literally 3 a.m. every night to get work done.
Right.
That's something that I'm always trying to achieve a balance for. So
that's good advice for Adam. I always tell Adam, don't confuse doing more with progression, because in the end, it's about doing more of the right things, right? So keeping that balance in all things, because here's what I always say, okay? Taking care of yourself is not selfish. I always say, when you say that pie chart, what comes first? This is just my ethos, but I always say, I always compare it to an airplane. You know when you go on an airplane and they tell you to put that air mask on, that oxygen mask on in case of an emergency? You have to put that oxygen mask on first before you can help anybody else. So I always say, take care, right? So take care of yourself first before you help your family, help everybody else. Because then you have more of yourself and a better version of yourself to show up for everybody else. I mean, when you're not, you know what I mean? When you're not like taking care, it's like, and in your work with everything shows up so much better when you are taking care of yourself first, and then you have more of that to share with everybody else.
The thing that's the hard part of what I've experienced lately is juggling or balancing, or like trying to learn the art of saying no.
Ooh, I love that one.
Usually your business it's usually like, for a long time your business tends to be, how do I get more? How do I get more? How do I get more?
Yes.
And then once there's this tipping point, it now becomes, how do I get better quality? So the hardest thing is, like, I never wanted to be this design snob.
Right.
That was like, I only work on $1 million homes. Sorry. Because I wondered that. That's something I wondered early on, was why is there this path of designers? And in Phoenix, it all led to a few things. Or what I'm proud of myself for is that what I think I've had a huge impact on is, every property I saw in Phoenix was always this like desert modern.
Right.
And it's a really cool style, but to build it is like $300 a foot starting price.
Right.
And In California, you're probably like, well, 300 a foot, that's cheap. But here, here that's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
What most people have is 150 a foot to build.
Sure.
Or what most areas would sustain. And so you have to think creatively about other styles. What other styles could work? Whether it's a remodel. People don't usually want to put more than $100 a foot into their remodel. And if they're doing an addition, that usually wants to be. So once you kind of learn that and say, how can I be a part of that? You're not going to be able to do the most excellent architecture ever, but you can do something. And that's the point for me, is that why do good architects and designers, they all kind of follow a path of, like, they'll do they get done with college, they work with someone for a while, then they get sick of it, start out on their own, and they do their mom's addition. Mm-hmm. Moms always hire their kids. It's great. And that launches their kid's career. So then they do their friend's remodel on something. And then, it's this progression that you see. And then once they get like really good, it becomes this like, I'm only going to do really high-end work.
Right.
Really, like the budgets need to get higher. Well, for me, of course I want that. I keep waiting because I feel like I'm untapped a bit. Like, I haven't been able to do the stuff that I haven't been able to show off my entire skill set because I'm limited by budget.
Right.
That's every designer feels that way. Like, there'll never be, you could be like, hey, here's $500 a foot to build something. And designers would be like, if I only had 700.
Absolutely.
So like I wanted to be the opposite of that. Yeah. And be like, how do you create like a good template for like a root level design?
Yes. And
get other people engaged and get people excited about, hey, here's what I can do.
Well, that's what separates you, though. That's what I think. You're right. It's easy to, gosh.
Yeah, because every time we look at your house, we're like, how does he do that?
Yeah, and the biggest thing is,
house is that price?
No, but I know how you do it. What I always tell Adam, what it is for one, it's good taste.
Well,
okay.
For one, and we're in Riverside.
No, that
is. The houses are cheaper.
Yeah, for sure. No, but here's the thing. I always say it's good taste, and I know you can I could see it through your work. So you can give somebody. I always describe it this way. You can give somebody, $2,000 to get an outfit together, and then give somebody $20 and go get it out. If that person with, you know what I mean? If that person that you gave that money to with the $2,000 has horrible taste, their outfit's going to still be shitty as, and then the person with $20, they go to Forever 21 and make it look awesome. So it's all about, it comes down to the taste. Of course, money does play a part. Of course you can create, if you have great taste and you have more money, of course. But I think the challenge for you, and I think, and you can tell me if this is right, the challenge for you is getting that budget and saying, how can I make this look like it's $1 million? And you've done that. You've conquered that. So
thank you. I appreciate it. It's not, this is the thing that I would say is that being able to walk in and kind of organize. You're almost like a wedding planner.
Yeah.
You come in and say, here's our budget. And being able to create that like puzzle / algorithm in your head of what we can do. That's because I've done so much on my own. I know what things cost. And I think that's there's always an argument with me is like, Joel's not an architect. And I kind of take that like, I agree. But I learned by doing my own projects, by developing and being on these job sites and doing, and saying, hey, why can't we do a plywood wall ceiling instead of drywall?
Right.
Plywood's only $5 more per sheet. Why should this cost more? And then I do it and be like, never again.
Yeah.
It turns out, there's a reason for everything. You figure all those reasons out, you do them, you fail your way forward, and you figure out what you can do, and then you get onto a system where when you're talking to clients or something, they're gonna show you what they like, and you have to be able to say, we can't afford this wall of glass that's literally floor to ceiling on this whole entire wall. That's crazy expensive. Or we can't do this board form concrete wall that's 20 feet high. But you still can do this, or this, and that will look awesome
Right.
for your budget. The ability to do that means you can actually help people, and they're always over.
Right.
There's never a project that's like, hey guys, is there anything else you wanted to do that's really cool? Because we are like 20,000 under budget.
It's like Chip and Joanna Gaines. It's like Chip and Joanna Gaines. We have like, you guys want the wall, or do you guys want
the cool driveway?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's get this moving along here. So I have another question here. So, do you ever see anyone copy your designs?
Yes.
Next question.
How does that make you feel, Joel?
Well, so I have a very unique approach on this, in that I'm torn, because I would put it this way: if people aren't knocking you off, then you're not good enough. So like, it's flattery. It's very flattering when people will
I agree.
attempt to, when you show that you have the ability to set certain trends.
Right.
The hard part goes back to the cliche developer that tries to copy you, and it ends up being like the D version of what you did, and then the next guy and the next guy, and now you look back at what you did, and you're like, I now hate it because so many people have done it the wrong way. I dragged my cool thought or cool thing down a level or two. What would I say? It devalues the original or something. But that being said, this is my other comment on that. Hey, who did I copy it from? Right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because I'll get people all the time that are like, hey, is it cool if I do your idea here that you did? And I'd be like, of course, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
They'd be like, hey, it was such a good, and I'm like, well, guess what? I think I decided to do that based off of a photo I saw 4 years ago on this project that I saw in Australia. And so, like, very rarely are our ideas completely
original.
New. It's your recipe of those ideas that you saw inspiration somewhere.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't mean that design is... I've done both, where literally, this will probably sound bad for me, but I'm just always like honest to a fault. Is that the way that the best projects that I've done is almost like paint by numbers through like Pinterest. Pinterest is a new thing. When we started designing, when my group started designing, it was like hard to find images or inspiration. And maybe you'd be like, oh, I'm going to do this finish with that. And now you can prove it. You can prove it now. So to me, one of the things about design was, in order to prove something, because it's not easy to say, hey, I want to do a charcoal and black kitchen. People think of this black hole like you're an idiot. Why would you ever do that? When you show them a photo of a charcoal and black kitchen, they're like, oh my God, I love that. It has like good natural light or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So, okay, so you kind of like prove it, and then you prove the next thing and prove the next thing, and you put this concept board together and you say, this is essentially the design that I want to do here. It's all to kind of like gain conviction out of your client. And then I've done a lot of projects where I just did it freehand from my thoughts in my head, my ideas. But those were shaped along the way by stuff I saw.
Right, you were inspired.
You can't always, So essentially I'm saying we're all copying each other, but there are people that I think of some of the really good architects that I know here. They were still influenced by like Frank Lloyd Wright or something or someone.
My heart.
But then there's the level of mimicry.
Right, I was going to bring that up. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. The mimicking, because here I'll just kind of chime in here. So there's a difference when you're inspired by architecture you saw in Brazil or you saw in Europe somewhere, Australia, and you bring that together. You take a little bit of that, a little bit of Europe, a little bit of Brazil, and then you meld it together and you create your own masterpiece. But then there's the difference where within your own, Phoenix, there's someone down the street, copying every single detail of what you've done. And I know Adam and I, we haven't truly like designed much, but we've just in our marketing, right? So when you know, you're like, okay, they've copied us, and you can bluntly see it, right? And there's a level of like flattery, but then when you're in the same industry, you're also like, get off, go away, you know? Like,
yeah, there are things that have broken my heart a bit.
Yeah.
But this is what I would say. Okay, so there's been a few that I've seen, and I've even had people call me and say, hey, I want you to design this for me, and I'd say, okay, great. Here's my price. Here's what I do, and they'd say, would you do it a little bit cheaper? And I would say,
no.
Would you pay a little bit more? So say my bid was like $9,000, and they say, would you consider doing this for $7,000? I'd be like, would you consider doing $11,000? Because I was already giving you a discount. I remember I had one client say, I had a client come to me and say, well, I could just hire someone else and show them your work and say, do that. And I'd say, great, I want to see that. She said, I want to see it. I want to see their version of something that I did.
Right.
And I went back and forth with this guy. Like, you really think it's that easy? I saw I've seen a few versions of mine that are terrible. Like, that are like, it looks like my design like jumped off a bridge or something and like fell, and like it was like that. It was like this terrible version of mine. And I've seen other versions that are great. That I'm like, you should do your own. If you're talented enough to knock that off to this level, you should be doing your own stuff. Like, don't copy things I did a year ago. Try to be more on the cutting edge, because there's been some that are like, wow, this is my 12th Street property exactly, or this is my, the one I did over on this street to a T. So I'm kind of like, I look at it like it's a double-edged sword. It's like, if you're on one hand, if no one's mimicking you, but
I hear you.
What I've always been against is the person that's like cheating that doesn't know, but it's devaluating and cheating. Those are things that, like, within the world of real estate development, you'll never get away from that. You'll never stop being blown away at the choices that developers and designers make. Like, I view every lot as an opportunity. Every house I fall in love with, I design it and I bond with it, and I think
there's a secret, though. That's what it is.
It is.
That's it right there. You have it. That's one thing that someone can come. It's just like the recipe. You know how they say, like, you brought this up earlier. You know how they say you can give the recipe to somebody, but then your mom just has that love, that special touch, and no one can replicate it. So it's the same thing. Just to bring up a situation with real estate, we had this one agent, I'm not going to name names, but is we do these charities, right? So after every transaction, we donate a portion of every transaction from our commission, no cost to anybody else, just to our 4 charities. And then we came up with this whole thing, right? So then this one guy that was like obsessed with us, like he was like really trying to get us to come onto his team and all this stuff. And we were like very cool with him. But then we started to realize he started to do like the same thing, trying to like, donate to charities and basically not be friends with this guy because it was just so much. But what I was telling Adam is that that's so funny, because what he's lacking is the story. What he's lacking is the actual passion behind it. It's not going to last long because it's only being copied. It's not coming from, from the heart, from the soul. So, and then plus Adam and I have this whole thing where there's baseball, there was so much depth to it, that where all this kind of dream came from, that they don't have that, So at the end of the day, it's going to whittle away, because we're going to stand stronger with it because we have the heart, right? And it's the same with you. Another thing I wanted to bring up, what inspires you every day? Is it your family? I mean, you kind of already answered that a little bit, because I feel like at this point in your life, you're inspired by something different than, maybe before. And I think that's just, as we evolve, that's the whole process of growing. But in terms of just your modern architecture, because that is the root of every design that you've really done is modern. What inspires you? Are you inspired by Australian architecture? Are you inspired?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, okay.
All right.
Yes, everything. Because I remember about a decade ago, I was obsessed with Brazil, everything coming out of Brazil. And I still have a little bit of that influence on stuff that, with design, it's funny, is like, I'm looking at the stuff I'm designing now that you guys won't see for a year. And it's good. It's good. And I can't wait. So it's kind of a cool thing, is that I felt like when you get older, I'm like, every birthday is like, cool, I'm just a little bit uglier and more wrinkly and less agile now. Right on. But what I love about design is that the older that you get, that it's like the more distinguished you are in your profession. You get cool jobs. Like the work side of it's cool. Like, wow, if you would have told me a couple of years ago the stuff that I'd be working on today, I would have been like, no way.
Right.
Okay, and so the stuff that I see coming out of Australia right now is something that I'm like, we can't, you can't do that. Like on Instagram, I follow like or 3/4 of I swear, all the good architects that are doing work in Australia.
I know, it's so funny when we follow somebody, there you are.
I'm like, God,
yeah.
I'm like, this person has 1,000 followers and Joel's following him.
I know, it's like, literally, it's like 200 followers. It's like 500.
Okay, and that brings
Joel.
up a good point. You know what, I want to know something funny is in this day and age, because I'm a little bit older, but I'm lucky enough to still be a little bit relevant in the world of social media.
For sure.
And it's such a big debate, right? I'll answer your question after this little tangent.
Okay.
In the world of social media, it's funny is that I have a twin brother that has like 450,000 followers. And then I remember my niece was over one day and she was asking about like your ratio. And I was like, what's that? And she was saying, like, I have 4,000 people that follow me, and I only follow, like, 200. And I'm like, oh. And I remember I went and looked, and this is like 2 years ago, I followed 5,000 people, and I had, like, 1,200 followers or something. And I was so embarrassed. I was like, oh, well. So then I have people that are like, how come you follow so many people? And before, I don't like having to deal with the algorithms and stuff. Social media is so frustrating because the minute it's perfect is the minute it'll start going downhill.
Absolutely.
But, okay, so I think that I never took a class on anything in my whole entire life, really. And I know I'm unique. But by the age of, say, 16, there's nothing that I could really learn from my art teachers. And yet I became a pretty talented artist. And then when I became, a realtor, I never took classes. I just learned and I got good at it. Mm-hmm. When I started with photography, I picked up a camera and I researched. And I'd go to YouTube and I'd, just do it in the field. And then I'd maybe made a couple friends and asked them questions. But I really just learned on my own, and that's how it is with design. And it's the very thing that I take a lot of heat from local architects for is like, you didn't go to school for it. And I want to be living proof that that's the best thing that would have ever happened to me, is that I didn't get trained to think like my teachers and I always wondered, like with art, everyone always used to tell me I needed to take art history classes.
No.
And I didn't care at all.
Joel,
that's kind of how
I went to school for 9 years and none of it. Okay, I can tell you. No, I'm serious. At first, granted, I did 2 majors. I did communications and then art. But I can tell you, and I tell this to my nephews, any young person that I can come across. I went to school forever. I could tell you the history of dance. I could tell you the history of chairs. I could tell architecture. But none of it, and great conversation I can have about it. But in reality, none of it contributes to my taste, to my knowing. It's a feeling. I just know. I don't know. I can take something that, like Adam knows, like we took our 70s, cabinets, chose cool colors and combine these textures and stuff, and I did it for nothing, and it looks good.
Yes.
That's where it's at. You can get somebody that has gone to the best school for architecture and all, but they don't have it. Again, if you give somebody money and give them, say, get me the best outfit you can, and they just don't have it. So and that's what I want to be. My twin he's got his PhD as a doctor, and at this moment in time he's crushing me financially, but we have this really cool friendly competition with each other that's like, no, I'm the dominant twin, and you're like, no, turns out I am, and we kind of flip-flop through life. And I didn't graduate college. I went to college and just stalled. Yeah.
I didn't know nothing sounded good. I'd pick a major and be like, I think I'll hate that. Then I just started educating myself, and I believe strongly in the ability to do that nowadays, which is how, with social media, I'm like, I have a window into the minds of all these great people that I learn that way. I'll learn, and I learned by looking at a photo.
Right.
And I might see a photo, and 2 years ago, I would be like, I would like the design for one reason. And 2 years later, I'll look at it and be like, I like this so much for something I didn't know at the time was that I loved it and I couldn't necessarily articulate why. And now I get it. It's this or that. And design is such a cool thing because you can never master it.
Yep.
There's no, things that you can master easily are like, they're not good for your soul. There's no, it's like a book that you read and now you put it down.
Yeah.
This is a great world to be in because you can only get better and better and learn more and aspire. So the reason why I'm big on like following people on social media is that it's like picking your influences. Right. And so I guess I wanted to say that that's something that I don't really care about the ratio because I'm way above. No, I'm not way above. I think I just followed another 800 people over the past couple of weeks. So that's like, why does it matter? But I love seeing a little window into that. That world is at night before I go to bed. It's a good probably 20 minutes on Instagram, scrolling, looking, screenshotting things, putting those things into folders.
Absolutely.
Categorizing things, being organized, and being able to use those in a meeting with a client. Absolutely. When you're talking about something, a picture can do what words never could. Oh. So the things that inspire me in design is everything coming from Australia, but I can't do the exactly stuff like that yet. In our downtown Phoenix, we can only support the B look of that, the B or C look, than the perfection that you see coming out of Australia. But hey, the B or C look here is the A look of Phoenix.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's the truth. That is the truth.
It's the truth. You capture the essence of it. That's the biggest thing.
Okay, but then what I wanted to say is what inspires me in the whole grand scheme of things is people coming up with new things, new ideas. It was freaking lonely about 7 years ago. Like in the world of downtown Phoenix, I was designing stuff that was really neat. And one of the hardest parts is that I would go to sell it, and back in, I call it the fun times, in like 2005, 2006, 2007, it was very easy to sell the house for like the architect's house for, 50% more than the average house on the street.
Right.
And, you'd know which architects to use that really understood the cost of modern design and could translate that to the lenders. And then little by little, like that's gotten harder and harder as time goes, as lenders kind of dictate appraisals, in my opinion. Appraisals are like, yeah, it's tough because it's not asking for it would be like me selling you a car and you us saying, hey, let's establish a price. And you were like, let's pay $10,000 and
absolutely.
And then I basically came back and said, hey, I looked at this up, and within a half mile of you over the last 6 months, this car has only sold for, $8,000 and $7,000. So I need it for $7,500.
Right.
I hope you'd be like, well, who told you to establish those parameters? I hope you'd question that, or that's how things have gotten is like, hey, we need six comps. We need 6 comps supporting the price of this all within. It's tough. I mean, you have to be able to, with appraisers, you have to basically be able to say, like, do you want to punish or reward good design, number one? And number two is, here's what I've sold. It's a little bit, it's, a half mile away, and here's what this guy sold, and here's a story of people paying this type of price for this product. But so it was very hard for me. Like, to get the world that I wanted was like the sum of my collective like skill set and intelligence that I've learned in 15 years in the world of real estate. So, and it's very, very challenging. It's hard to do. So to get this, I needed other people doing it. I couldn't be the only guy doing the cool projects. And
For sure.
for that I did. I had to design for other people. I had to get other people involved. I had to teach other people. It was tough because I can't be the only comparable sale, and I wanted things to go in an upwards trajectory. I wanted people to quit being scared, and I can't stand the same mindset of every single person coming into it is like, well, I got this house, it looks like I could spend 60 on it.
Oh, yeah.
And you're going, why? If you can add some space, but you can do this, and you can spend 260 on it. It's fine.
Yeah. That's where
that's
we're at.
like
Because here
That's
we're still in that market here. Not even market. We're still in Riverside. People are coming off.
It's so virgin out here.
It's
amazing.
so green out here, and it's you got the flippers who are absolutely making a profit, but they're at the same time there's no good design. I can tell you, I haven't seen not one to the scale of what you're doing out there in Phoenix. So when you come and you present an investor or even a hard money guy with this, they think you're crazy and they don't understand it. So it's very difficult in the beginning.
That's why I think I'm pretty well received. The people that were there and that remembered it,
Sure.
and know from Phoenix is I think I'm considered like Kevin Bacon in Footloose or something.
Yeah.
Like we were told we can't dance, and I went in there and questioned that.
Yeah.
So okay, but and I think I earned that to some degree.
No, you have.
But okay, this would be the thing. What I like, what I'm inspired by, I talk in tangents. What I like is people that are getting some new twist out there. What I look for is that new innovator that comes up that you're like, who is this guy? I've met a lot of friends that way. Yeah. What inspires me is the new person that is decided to be daring and bold.
Love that.
Yeah.
It's been there's this Knob Modern Design. She's amazing. I met her a while back ago, and I was like, who is this person? And I get so fascinated by people that decided to be more like how I am.
Right.
People that'll say, wow, I'll look at them and say, this is your style, and they're coming into the fold. And I remember a guy named Tony Williams or Anthony Williams came out of nowhere, and I saw his property, and I was like, oh my God, I love seeing other people joining this whole movement. That's the thing that inspires me most about design is when you know that it wasn't in the Coronado district. I have a couple of friends that just did a house, and it's so amazing. And they hired a different designer, and I feel so thankful that it doesn't just have to be me anymore. It can be other people.
Absolutely.
So that's my response.
No, I hear you. I mean, Adam and I always say that. We say, someone's going to have to be the daring one, that first one to get it started out here. And then after that, hopefully you can only hope that you start a movement so that everybody can help each other as a community. I mean, you're one person, you can't do it alone. But once I totally feel that I feel you on this, that once you start to influence others to bring that creativity out of themselves, and when they start creating things that are within their own style, and you start to see your own city unfold, and that is gratification. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
it is.
That's exactly what you take with you, Joel. That's the stuff you take with you.
I hope so.
Yeah, no, you take that with you. All right, so for aspiring designers out there, what are some mistakes that you have made that they can learn from, including me?
Okay, one. But there's two important things here to understand. One is that this is big picture stuff as a designer, not as a developer. Okay. I'll say one as a developer, one as a designer. Okay. One, I have a higher threshold or capacity for things that are for density. In downtown Phoenix, I look at it every property in here should have a guest house or a little addition, or in my neighborhood, it's a bunch of 800 square foot houses on 7,000 square foot lots. And we want people to come to more people living downtown, more density. The way that the role that design plays in urban planning is huge. The way it helps shape things. And so I've always wanted more. There's a lot of people that move to Phoenix. I've wanted more people to be moving to the core areas than to the suburbs. That's what one of my like side missions.
We love
so
you.
I have a higher,
that's oh my gosh. It's like you're in our brain. No, it's crazy.
Oh, thank you.
No. Crazy. Okay, go on.
We're in your brain.
We're in yours. Yeah, if one of the other.
I spy on you guys.
no, I think we're in yours. Yeah, no, that's crazy.
Okay, so in this, my higher threshold for density means I might be okay with something a little bigger, a little taller, and if you want to keep your message pure with the neighborhood, there's like you have to increase with the times. You have to like slowly increase, footprints. Like if the neighborhood's used to 1,200 square feet homes with like say 18-foot plate height, that means like the center of the structure. I don't want to be like architect speak. Like say that the top part of that building is 18 feet high and it's the 1,200 square foot is what the majority of the homes in that neighborhood are. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how good your design is. If you're double that, you failed.
Absolutely.
And so the respecting that is huge. It's something that I've learned is like, I would look at it like, well, these lots cost a lot of money and there's homeowner rights, there's lot rights, so yes, the zoning says you can do this, but that doesn't mean you should do it.
For sure.
And that's the hard thing is when you're a designer, your clients are going to come in. If you work with developers at all, they're going to say, we need 10-foot ceilings. We need, and we in order to make any money on this, we have to build out 2,000 square feet. I get that. I take a look at the numbers and I'd say, you're right. The cost of construction has gone up it's seriously probably double what it was 8 years ago to build out here. So it's tough to make anything work, and people don't usually hire a designer before they buy something. They hire you after, so it's now a problem that they have that you'd like to be able to help them with. So the goal would be to get it to where you're fighting them. You're challenging developers or your clients to say, yes, you can go bigger, but that doesn't mean you should go bigger.
Right.
So respecting scale is huge. And the other thing, what I've learned, well, I would say this, like in regards to marketing, don't get like cutthroat and too competitive with your peers. Your peers are all great people. There's more than enough business for all of you. I meet with a lot of the good designers, and they're always like, almost like, I don't know, gossiping or trashing each other.
Yep.
Or saying like this person or that person. And I try to see the positive in everyone around me and what they're doing. Right. So that's another thing that I'd say. And then in the world of development, in the world of design, I would say that the thing that I've learned most is which projects to not be a part of. Like it's when you look at it like, okay, I could make $10,000 if I just design this for this person. But how are they going to build it out? Are they going to honor you, or are they going to do a terrible job and make you look bad? Right. Are they going to? Those are the things that you have to look at. That, for me, there's no way of knowing that until you take on clients. But for me, that's the important thing. Is now I look at it going, this person is willing to spend a lot and he's willing to do these things, but he has no experience, and I have a feeling that this is going to end up being a terrible outcome, and your name's tied to it,
Yeah.
So like scanning and screening is huge.
What about when you told me this one we had a phone call some time ago, but this one stood out to me a ton, was you said that you can sometimes get the same outcome using even just different materials, and that's where the secret lies, in the sense that you said, like, for example, the metal, like, what is it?
Corrugated?
Yeah.
Yes. So you do it, right,
yeah.
But you said if you do it in wood,
the
board and batten, you can do it in wood and paint it black, well, never black, but, a variation of black, that it always has that, it can give you that same feeling, that same essence, if you will, of the metal, right? If it was made out of metal.
Yes.
And I think that I took that, I was like, you know what, that's like it right there too, because you have to, as a designer or as even a builder, whatever it is, even if you're starting off as a flipper, the biggest thing is to find those ways, those tricks. And I think that those are things that you've learned along the way, that you said, you know, I want to do it out of metal because it looks awesome, right? But at the same time, you are in Phoenix, and you got to figure out how to make something look amazing, but still on the budget that you're restrained to.
Yes, I have. You know, I want to get this look that costs $300 a foot, and I have $160 a foot to do it.
Sure.
What are the things that need to be cut?
Sure.
That's important. That's wildly important.
Sure.
That's something that I always look for in like new designers is their ability to
be creative,
get the biggest bang for the buck. Yeah, be creative on finishes. And it's funny. There's this the edition that I did for the house that Lisa and Wayne Woods bought. I get so many people that are like, "Hey, you know that was like a metal that it was like you did like a shipping container or something."
Sure, yeah.
And that was the funniest thing is that it's not metal at all. It was a board and batten finish.
Yeah.
And I learned because on this property I did on 13th Street, the first one I did that Dwell picked up on and ran with, and it won like House of the Week.
The one I stalked?
By Dwell?
The one I drove by and stalked?
that.
I love that house.
I lost money on it.
Did you?
Appraisal guidelines changed a few months prior, and it was like the design took me way too long, and I said, okay, like, step it back a little bit.
But it looks good.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of touched on earlier of like being thankful.
Yeah.
Being thankful for things that don't happen your way is that in reality, I've never made more money on a project before than that one.
Right.
And yet I lost on paper. I lost 15, but it ignited people. People were like, "Wow."
So I was going to ask that. So do you believe that it almost like that right there, that perfect example, that situation of you maybe losing money on this project, but it leaks into other opportunities in the future, that at that moment you're like, damn it, like I'm losing money. But then in the end, you look back now and you say, well, you know what? That right there opened up this door, and it opened up this door, and it opened it. Because I feel like the reason I asked this is because I feel like so many people are all about the money now. And I think that those mistakes, they at all costs, they want to prevent those mistakes from happening. But with that, they don't create amazing things, right? So because they don't create amazing things, that doesn't open new doors or new opportunities.
I have people all the time that come and say, well, you know, I like this house, but I checked it on it doesn't really fit my model. And I'll say out of curiosity, can I see your model? And, you know, I'm like, nothing will fit your model. Like, it needs to be this and this, and there needs to be comps that could support this. And I'm like, nothing will ever fit that model. And then it's like this sucks to say, but your model's your model until it isn't. Like, when you start construction, things tend to take a different turn and twist. Like, no matter how much I have tried to like seek perfection in my budget, my control over the budget, my control over, is there a way to determine exactly what this is going to cost?
All right. So what are your dreams, Joel? Like where do you want to be? I mean, it sounds so cliche to say, where do you want to be in the next 5 years? But, you know, really, what are your dreams? What are your end goals?
Okay. So where I'd like to be in 5 years is I have a lot of room to grow in terms of marketing. I'd like to try to create a little bit more of a brand.
Okay.
That is something that I would get hired on projects that are all over the country, really. That's starting to happen. I have 2 jobs that are out of state right now.
Nice.
And I love them. And I feel very comfortable in my ability to you know, visit in the beginning and design it and be a continued source of help without living there. Okay, and then 2 would be the goals that I have related to work would be someone has to do a modern subdivision here. Someone needs to pull that together. So I'd like to try to like a new modern subdivision where there was like a cul-de-sac with eight houses on there that are all modern and matching, like they're all monochromatic or something. I think that would be a good goal of mine. And then also to I started doing a lot of work in more expensive areas, higher price points. That I love it. I love being part of projects that have bigger budgets because you're not as constricted on style.
Absolutely.
But I don't want to lose. I don't want to stop thinking for that guy that only. I took a job on just recently, and I gave it the same amount of passion as I did my other jobs. But a guy called me and said he bought a condo in this community called Three Fountains. Al Beadle was the architect of this, and he said, I don't have much to pay you, and my budget is $30,000 on the build out. And I started laughing, and I said, $50,000 is too small of a budget for that place.
Right.
30 is crazy. And he was like, well, that's my budget. And I said, well, you're going to need me then. So yeah, I think I charged him like $2,000. Now I can't do that all the time.
Right.
But we had so much fun, and I was like, that's such a rewarding. I just got pictures of that one. Yeah. He just pretty much got it cleaned. It's finished, and he sent me photos, and he said Al would be proud of us.
Oh.
Because that's something I believe strongly in, is when you get something that was an iconic architect, don't try to outmaneuver the original architect and be the star of the show. Let the original architect stay the star of it.
Absolutely.
And that if he arose from his grave, he would be proud. That's the one thing I described to this guy, this client that I have, before I took that job, and I think we did a great job. That's what I want, is to keep like humble and keep thinking for the everyday person.
I love that.
And then in life, where I want to be, for say in 5 years, is balanced, and being a good father and husband, as much as I am good designer.
Right. Oh, I love that. All right, so I'm going to ask you one last question. Now, this question, Joelle, it always stumps people. I ask it every single time we have a guest on, but it always turns out to be the best answer we get. So, what do you know for sure?
No pressure or anything.
No pressure. No, but what do you know for sure?
What do I know for sure?
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna equate this to the world of design.
Okay.
Okay. What I know for sure is that no matter what you do, it's always going to be controversial. I know for sure that it is impossible to please everyone. I know that there is no straight diagonal line towards success. It's, it looks more like the stock market or something. It's up and down. It's all over the place. But if you stay learning and you stay educating and stay true to your message, that path will lead you to great places, even if there are stumbles along the way, even if there are small defeats and losses. That those losses get further and further apart, and the victories get more dense.
No, that's always the best one. No, I love that. That's so good. And I want to kind of end this with when you say about controversy. There's this quote where he says, if you go through life without pissing anybody off, that means you've never done anything extraordinary. If you have enemies, then good, because that means you stood up for something good in your life. So I love that.
That's great. That's a perfect phrase, because just in my life, it's been hard because, if I post a project on social media, it might get 500 likes and 35 comments or something praising it. And then you go talk to the friends you have in the neighborhood, and they're like, oh my God, you got to do more. You got to do it. And they're praising it. Can I get in there and see it? And then you go to the neighborhood restaurant, and an older lady comes up to you and says, so you're the guy ruining our neighborhood.
Of course,
yes.
Can we talk about that? It's so tough, because I just wish that you could please everyone. I look at it going, how do you...
Nope.
But I don't believe in designing collectively or something.
No. I call it the disease to please. And earlier you said about you're learning how to say no to people, and I always say it's a disease to please. There's there's an art and a formula to really learning how to say no. Because so many times we say yes when we really mean no. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
And it becomes
or
about
you get
them.
tricked into something, or you get guilted, or you got to do this for this person. And
it's a battle you'll never win because you're never going to please everybody. There's always going to be somebody. And then it becomes about them versus, like I said, you got to treat yourself first. You got to worry. And that's not selfish to care about yourself first. It's honorable.
I posted something on as a story a while ago, and it's the Man in the Arena.
Yes, I love that quote. That's my favorite quote.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes.
But I had a lot of battles with city council, and there would be people opposing me, and then people that were sticking up for me. And a couple of different peers of mine sent me that quote. I'd never heard it before. I was like, how did I live this long without seeing this? But it's pretty relevant to people that are in our industry. And there's a balance of listening to other people and trying to not be. You can't be arrogant, but you can't the same property that one person sees as the greatest thing they've ever seen, another person will look at as the worst thing that they've ever seen. And
absolutely. That's
not your job. Your job is in a way to say, was the homeowner happy?
Yeah.
And I guess that's the controversy is some people say, no, a good designer would take all the good context of the neighborhood and then mold them into something that the whole entire neighborhood could enjoy and appreciate.
Absolutely.
While I believe that is true, everyone in historic districts were just doing fake old stuff, and I looked at it like, these why can't you do something as exciting as the historic houses that have these cool brick details and these amazing ornate? We can't do that anymore. We can't do masonry the way that we used to. We can't do but we can do something that's more bold or this or that complements it, that helps put energy into the neighborhood. And that's the reason why I kind of feel that you're not going to get everyone that agrees, but I am big on percentages. And for me, it's I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't feel like there was a 75% approval rating for it.
Absolutely. No, we live by that. I Am Warhol, our blog. The reason I called it I Am Warhol is because I am are the two most powerful words. Whatever comes after I am are your most powerful words, right? So if I am strong, that's what you believe. So we said Warhol because Warhol did exactly that. He went against, realism. He went against that traditional art that everybody, right? So what we want to do, everybody as designers, I've had interior designers who are like, your podcast isn't about design. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing something different, right? So I'm taking a different approach to it. Yeah. So, it's always about, so that's where, that's
love that.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know what they're like. Why do you call it I'm Warhol? And I'm like, that's because we're trying to do something different out here.
Yeah, a shift of paradigm or something.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
I also wanted to say I'm really sorry to hear about your mom. I didn't say that earlier, but I do think that it's beautiful, the message that you seem to take from it. So
thank you. No, it's been already 3 years here, but we've gained so much from her passing, and that sounds again morbid or horrible to say, but I told Adam, we started this business and it's the only way I know how. I don't know how to do anything any different, and I feel like she lives on through this. You know how people, when they if their kids pass away from cancer, they'll go and start an organization and their kid just their legacy continues. That's what I want for this. So much wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for her. So thank you.
I love that.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right, Joel.
Yeah. You're awesome.
No, we appreciate you. We appreciate you so much.
And ditto. Hopefully you got good enough stuff and that I wasn't a babbling moron.
Hey, before you go, if you enjoyed this podcast today, we do ask that you give us a rating and a review. It really helps new listeners be exposed to Good Vibes Sunday and bring them on over. So as always, we appreciate you and thank you. Thank you for tuning in, Good Vibers. And be sure to subscribe to Good Vibes Sunday by downloading the podcast app found at the App Store. Catch you all next week. Have a happy Sunday.